Quick question for you, my jewelry designer and creative product friends. Do you work from home? If the answer is yes, do you ever struggle with being your most productive when you're working from home? I want to ask you that question, be honest, because if you're anything like me, sometimes the answer is it's hard to be productive at home. And a lot of times that has to do with the workspace that we're working in. Hey there, I'm Tracy Matthews. I'm the Chief Visionary Officer of Flourish and Thrive Academy. I'm also the host of the Thrive by Design podcast. And I help struggling and overwhelmed jewelrypreneurs become in-demand designers with the desired brand effect. If you haven't done so yet, I would love for you to subscribe to our channel. And if you like this video, at the end of it, I'd love for you to like it, because this is a conversation with a very special guest that I have today. Her name is Tobi Fairley, and I'm excited to have her on the Thrive by Design podcast and on this episode in particular, because I know a lot of us have been forced into working in new work environments or to take our office basically into the home. Plus, we have our entire families there a lot of times, and I know for a fact that it's probably been weighing on a lot of people from a productivity standpoint. And so Tobi Fairley is going to be sharing with us tips to help maximize productivity, create a space that is going to help you be the most creative, and to inspire more brilliance coming from your creative mind. So I'm really excited to introduce you to Tobi. She is an award-winning interior designer. She also mentors creatives and helps them build successful businesses, similarly to like what we do over here at Flourish and Thrive, and Creatives Will Rule the World. I love this interview with Tobi because we had a lot in common. So let's dive in, because I know that you might be really interested in how you can be a little bit more productive in your home office and workspace. I am super excited to have a very special guest from a different industry who works with people in a very similar way that we do, just in a different space. Tobi Wells Fairley, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're so welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. You know, I saw an article, I think my friend Selena, who introduced us, I saw an article that you were featured in Forbes. I think she posted it, and it was super exciting to see that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about your journey, because you're an interior designer. You also help people with productivity and creativity and spending more time in their creative zone of genius, which are all things that I totally jive with. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about your story. So why don't we dive into that?
Okay, perfect. So let's see. How far back in this story do we want to go?
Whatever is relevant.
Awesome. I am from Arkansas. Grew up in South Arkansas in a tiny town, have always been creative. My mom was always creative. But the kind of what my Forbes article talks a little bit about, or a lot about actually, is that when it was time for me to go to college back in the 90s, it really wasn't kind of on my radar screen to go into a creative industry. I was more, focused on what's something responsible or reputable or that will make a lot of money, or those things that we think about and that our parents are thinking about, like, what are you going to do when you grow up? And so I went into accounting. My dad always said, a business degree, particularly a finance or an accounting degree, is always going to help you. And he was right. But what I quickly found in that process is that I did not want to be an accountant. That was not my zone of genius. Now, I'm thrilled that I have that education, that background, and I actually finished my accounting degree. But I also then immediately turned around and went back and got an interior design degree, because in that process of learning about business, about accounting, I also learned what I didn't want to do for a living. And I really found my calling in that process, because I was always creative. And I mean, even as a child, my parents would wake up and I would have rearranged my room in the middle of the night. I mean, literally, I remember like wedging myself between the wall and the dresser and pushing it over with my feet, because I would decide it needed to be on that wall instead of the other wall, which is a common story you hear about a lot of interior designers. We all have this in common, that we were rearranging our houses or our parents' houses or our grandparents' houses. So definitely was always there, but I really leaned into it. Went back to school, ended up also getting an MBA. And so I entered the world of creatives as sort of an anomaly, the right brain, left brain creative, the person who really understood business. And it has served me so well. And so I built a wonderful business, a nationally recognized, nationally published interior design business, luxury clients all over the country, some outside the country. I have 5 product lines where I create furniture. So I really kind of did everything you can do in that industry. But about halfway through my career so far in design, which is, that's 21 years. So about 10, 12, 13 years ago, around the last recession, really, when we were kind of in an environment like we are right now, where things were uncertain, and everybody was thinking, how am I going to pivot or shift? I was looking at my business thinking, if the bottom falls out of this design thing, like, what do I have to offer? And what I really quickly learned is there were so many creatives who wanted to know how I had built a brand, how I'd gotten published, how I'd built a social media following, how I had honestly just made money, which so many creatives don't do. And again, that was the whole starving artist thing I talked a lot about in Forbes. And so at that point, I opened up a consulting business. I started coaching people, having masterminds, and that's led me all the way to today, where I have an online coaching program for creatives, which is one of my favorite things I've ever done. And I help creatives really create a life and business that they really dream about, not the ones that they kind of accidentally create so often, that equals kind of, burnout and low pay. So it's been really, that's kind of the overarching theme of this process and of my life, really. And it's been a really fun journey so far.
That is so exciting. And, we have a lot in common, because in addition to Flourish and Thrive Academy and the Thrive by Design podcast, I also work with creative entrepreneurs doing something very similar, which is super fun. But really, it's about helping them spend more time in their creative zone of genius, because that thing that you were just talking about, that burnout thing, it's like a real thing. And if you're not spending most of your time doing what you're best at, burnout is going to happen right away, which is
yes. And I've learned very well that I am very much visionary and not the integrator. I understand systems, and I'm so structured and organized, like you probably are too. I'm just not the person on my team we want in the trenches doing all the details. I'm like totally 40,000 foot view visionary lady. And that's where I thrive. So that's where I try to spend most of my time, for sure.
Awesome. That is amazing. So now I wanted to talk to you a little bit about organizing your space, because in a lot of ways we have things that we teach that are similar. Like you teach time blocking. We also teach that. We talk about having we call it a chief visionary officer mindset, but you're talking about CEO mindset, and all these things. And what I think is really unique is that you have an interior design background. So
yes,
a lot of people are coming from, maybe having a studio or an office space or somewhere where they go. And these jewelry designers who typically might be working with a team or outsourcing some of their work are now forced into their home with their kids at home, doing the school thing, trying to get work done, trying to keep their businesses afloat. But that can feel really chaotic, especially if you aren't used to working from home and there's so many things going around. So what are some of your best tips on optimizing your time so that an entrepreneur can stay really focused when there are so many distractions around?
Yeah. So I love this question. So as you said, I'm so into time blocking, and that really changed my life a few years ago. So kind of with that as a minimum baseline that both you and I believe in, right? Yes. Which, I mean, let's just be honest. A lot of people, especially a lot of creatives, have trouble following time blocking. It's really like that. What I see in my clients is they love the process of mapping it all out and making it all pretty and making things colorful, and they fit in all the blocks. And then when it comes time to actually do the things, they get to that block and they're like, I don't feel like doing that. That's not what I like. I got to wait for the creative mood to strike me. And so they're constantly hijacking their own schedules, right? So one of the first things we have to really learn to do is actually show up for ourselves and do what I call move through resistance, and just kind of admit and just know that we're not ever even as much as we love our businesses and our clients, we're never going to want to do what's on our schedule when we get to that block, right? We're just not. And that's why we really have to have this understanding that we're going to have obstacle thoughts come up every time when we get to the time blocking, and we're going to need to have a strategy in place to go ahead and do it anyway, right? And so one of the things I do, as simple as it is to, when I get to those moments, and I have them every day. I had them this morning on a project I'm working on. I'm like, I hear the thoughts come up if I don't feel like it, and I just kind of laugh, and I become like the watcher of my own thoughts. And I'm like, oh, that's hilarious. That's the excuse we're going to pull out today. Oh, that's funny. That's really good, Tobi. I hadn't thought about that one in a while. Okay, get back to work. And it's really just in the setting of your expectations, right? Because a lot of us are like, what's wrong with me? I don't follow the schedule. I don't follow through. And I just want everybody to know, first and foremost, nobody wants to. Right? None of us, even those that are good at it, we don't want it. So that's the first thing, is to really start to manage your expectations around the calendar and the time blocking. But it's just truly important that you follow through. I think one of the other parts of it is, now that we're working from home, I think one of the mistakes people are making is they're expecting to take what was their work schedule the way it was at the office and sort of just plop it down over top of their current existence, right? They're like, well, now my husband's working from home. He's an attorney. My daughter's a teenager. She's schooling from home. And I'm here, like, expecting to have the same day I had 3 months ago or 4 months ago before that happened is very unrealistic. And so I watch people creating so much frustration because it's like, well, I have to do this and I have to be at this place in this moment or on this call, and they're not anticipating what else is happening in their environment. And truly, this is an environmental thing, right? It's not just time blocking, it's the spaces we're living in. Exactly. And we have to understand, and now, again, manage our expectations and plan for how this might look different. And I know a lot of people have young kids, so it might be that you literally are working 2 hours in the morning before they get up, and you're working 2 hours in the evening when you trade off with your spouse. But having the expectation that you're going to have 8 to 5 uninterrupted is completely crazy. It's not going to happen, and you're going to create a ton of frustration for yourself. And a lot of us as creatives, we tend to fall into that all or nothing thinking. It's so easy to do that. And so then we're like, well, the whole day is shot, the whole day is ruined, because we were not managing our expectations. And so what I've done that's helped me a lot is say, what are the non-negotiables I have to get done today? And that might only be 3 things. It might only be these 3 things. And I put them in places that I feel pretty confident that they're sort of isolated or protected. And I also physically isolate myself in a room, in a zone, in a spot when I'm going to go do that focus work. And beyond that, sort of all bets are off in a way, so that I can let myself not move into this place of frustration all the time, because I'm bumping up against almost like a glass ceiling, right? You're bumping up against an expectation, and it's really throwing you off. So I think those 2 things right off the bat are really, really important. We're not going to want to do what we're supposed to be doing, especially when people are at home with us, when they're watching TV, when they're having, lunch together. And we're also not really doing a good job of reimagining how our day should look. And coming from a design standpoint, for your audience and mine, interior designers for sure, like, it's so fun to allow ourselves to lean into our strengths. We're great at designing things. We're great at solving problems. So if we want to start to think about, how do I design my day with my current parameters, which is completely different than we've been approaching it, we can have some huge aha moments and mental shifts that can make us really, really productive, because we've taken these. Okay, these are the problems. Husband, kid, whatever, Netflix. Here's the jobs I have to get done. How do we put those things together like a puzzle so that we really create the results that we want, and not totally remove frustration, but really kind of, mitigate it, control it a little bit, lessen it, because we've really been intentional about how we design our days.
Yeah, it's been an interesting process, I think, for everyone, because I usually live in New York City. That's where I reside. And my boyfriend lives in Arizona. And when this whole thing kind of came about, like I decided on a Sunday morning, it was March 15th. I think it was the day that everything started kind of shutting down in New York. I'm like, I'm getting on a plane. I'm coming here. I don't know when I'm coming back. And we're just going to figure it out. Well, I live alone and Jason has children. So it's been interesting because his kids are here about half the time. And it's hard. Like I can see how people with children would feel off kilter because like, you know, my typical routine of like getting up or having like all these things on the calendar where maybe you have to do interviews. Like Jason was just in here doing a meeting for one of his clients. And I was like, this is the only room that is not too echoey in your house that I can shoot it.
Get out.
And a podcast and get away. You know, it's like, sorry, you gotta go.
Leave. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the first things my husband and I did because he doesn't work from home normally. I do work from home normally. I moved my office into my home almost 4 years ago. I've loved every minute of that. Prior to that, I had 17 years of being outside of the house, having a team on site, having, you know, several thousand square feet and a whole bunch of employees. And I shifted to a virtual model, which I have loved, but I'm not used to him being here. And I'm only used to my daughter being here in the summer because she's usually at school during the day. So the first thing I did with him, like literally I was like, okay, ground rules. Like, these are your zones. These are my zones. And we literally did. We're like, you can have the living room. There's a desk in there, even though I do sometimes like to work in there. I'll concede that room. I'll take my upstairs space, which is what I'm in right now. That's really my yoga room. And it's where I podcast and other things. And then I'm like, I get the bedroom except for sleeping because I like to hang out in there with my laptop on the bed with my coffee. You can have what we call the study or the kind of man cave. But we literally, and we have stuck to those zones this whole time. And it has been so helpful because we were already anticipating he's going to be on the phone sometimes while I'm doing a podcast or video. And so he's downstairs on the other end of the house for me right now. So if we're both talking at this moment, neither of us have any idea that the other one is. So so I think it's a lot about being intentional and thinking about the environment. And some people are like, well, we have 2 rooms and there's 4 of us in here because we live in the city or whatever. You do have to get very creative. But I think just doing what you're saying and comparing schedules versus activities versus zones, seeing if you can alternate, if you have to be talking, if they can do a quiet thing and vice versa. I mean, it takes some maneuvering, but it can at least be improved from what would happen when you just sort of all show up with your own expectations and haven't really been mindful of each other. You're laughing because I know what you mean because it's so, I mean, it's mass chaos otherwise, right?
It is nuts. And, you know, it's funny because Jason and I have been talking about like, what can we do to like kind of change up the sets? Like the design of his house is just so different than my space. And like, I love it that you're an interior designer because you usually have this like really nice backdrop and I'm a jewelry designer. So everything's like gold and blush and like dark gray and these like metallic colors. And I'm here and I'm in like a dude's place with an office. So we're like, I'm like, you know, the aesthetics is going out the windows for now. But
brown and brown.
Yeah.
Or gray and gray.
Beige,
whatever.
beige.
Beige and beige. Whatever. That's any guy thing is going to be like just a color. It's either brown or gray or blue or beige. And that's pretty, you know, that's kind of it most of the time, unless they are an interior designer or something else. But most dude spaces are not going to be aesthetically exciting for sure.
Yeah. And so we're talking about like, I just ordered a bunch of stuff from CB2 because I like some of their things. So we can like maybe build like a backdrop set or something. For me. So like when I'm recording, it looks good. So, you know.
Great idea. That's such a good idea. And that's the kind of things I do in general with people's spaces. So you're right. Like what I love to do is combine the work I do with people on their businesses with the work I do with people in their homes. So how do I create environments that increase your productivity, your profitability, your focus, how you feel, how you want to feel, what kind of sleep you get at night. And so that's the very kind of thing we're looking at. We're going like, how do you, even if your whole environment does not reflect your business quite yet or who you aspire to be, like how can, and like you, it's not that it didn't in your other home, but like in this space, like how do you become intentional and thoughtful about exactly like you're saying, a backdrop, and where do you locate that, where there's natural lighting and where there's, you know, sound control and all the things you need, and literally kind of going through the design checklist of how how do I make this space work for this activity? Yeah.
So one of the questions I was gonna ask you, but you kind of covered it in what we already talked about, was like, when you don't have a dedicated workspace, like how do you organize that? And it sounds like just like you guys pick a spot, like your husband gets the spot and you get that spot and you guys move around. Now, for people who are already working from home and have a dedicated workspace, like how do you recommend for them to kind of optimize that space for productivity and creativity and all the things that they're trying to complete as a business owner?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, and a lot of people will be raising their hand like, yep, that's me. The funny thing we do with offices a lot in houses is we're like, okay, I need to work from home. Let me pick that tiny, dark back bedroom with all the boxes piled in there that we haven't gone through in years. And it has the tiny window with no views and no natural light, and it's kind of hot in there, or cold, or both, at any given time. Let me pick that space, and that is for sure where I will be the most productive, right? Like with a stark white wall or a beige wall, like you're saying, like that is just the most inspirational space. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just because it's not being used that we're like, oh yeah, that's the perfect space. And so really, I mean, you can do things to even optimize a space like that, but I would rather you start with a different set of sort of criteria in mind, and so start to think about where you thrive, right?
Can I pause you right there just for a moment? Because it just made me think of something really funny. So about 2.5 years ago, I moved to a new apartment in New York City. I was living in the West Village. I moved to a new neighborhood called Hudson Yards. It's a beautiful, brand new luxury apartment with all the finishes. So like, it was amazing, like going from my little walk up kind of West Village place. But it was funny when I first moved into the West Village apartment, into this particular apartment, it was a 2-bedroom, and I specifically wanted a 2-bedroom because I had an office space for many, many years. And then I wanted to just build a business with a virtual team. So when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, this tiny little bedroom in the back would be like a great size for an office. And then I'm like, it's so dark in there. I'm gonna like fall asleep and want to basically like want to kill myself every day.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're like, I'm gonna get sleepy when it gets hot. I'm gonna be miserable when it's cold. I like want to poke my eyes out because I can't see, like there's no place to look down a street or open a window and get some fresh air or like have any natural light. Yeah, totally. And then we're like, I don't understand why every time it's time to work, I would rather sit in the comfortable living room and watch television, you know, on the cozy sofa instead of going to like basically the equivalent of a straitjacket and put myself in it for several hours and wonder why I don't want to be productive, right?
It's so funny. So I opted, instead of like the room that should have been the bedroom, to make the tiny little dark room that could barely fit my bed in it, because it was, you know, this is New York. Spaces are tiny. Totally. And I took the best room for my office because I knew I would be spending most of my time in there at night. And, you know, I could have multiple backgrounds and backdrops. And the thing about living in New York is sometimes you have to multi-purpose one room for two things. So I had to like still use it as basically a closet in a way, but I tried to make it look nice and put everything away. Yeah,
I love that. And that's exactly what I would recommend people do. And I do love multi-purpose pieces of furniture and multi-purpose spaces. Even if you're in the middle of the South where I live, where we have kind of urban sprawl and we have big houses, I would still encourage people to not buy more house than they need and just learn how to really maximize and optimize each space that they have, right? And by using it for multiple purposes and other things. So you're exactly on the right track. So if you're looking for that space in your house, or you're in a space and you want to start to optimize it, I mean, there is a checklist that, like what we've kind of basically what we've inferred already with this conversation is, you know, check out the space. Is it dark? Is it cold? Creatives do not do well in windowless spaces. We don't do well when we can't, like when we're just staring at a blank wall. Not great for us. Like if that's the only option, then have something on that wall that's inspiring, a beautiful piece of art, or even some photography or something that feels environmental, that almost is like an extension of the space. Like you're looking into a view in a sense, because you can mimic the kind of what would be happening if you had windows. But like for me, I look down in this space I'm in, there's windows on 2 walls, and I look down this beautiful tree-lined street. I see people walking by and walking their dogs, and it's not really a distraction to me. It actually makes me feel comfortable. It makes me want to stay in this space. So really, you want to make the space attractive. Even like James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits, he says you want to make things attractive for your habits. Well, that's definitely true for your workspace, not just aesthetically pleasing, but you want it to attract you to want to go there. Is your chair comfortable? Is your desk comfortable? Is the lighting good or bad? Bad lighting meaning like if it's dark, if there's kind of like a fluorescent bulb or bad LED lighting that looks very blue, it's not warm, it's not cozy, it doesn't mimic sunlight. All of those things are going to make you want to escape the space for sure. And then you can really also look at color psychology, which is an actual real thing, and think about how you feel in spaces. Because you jokingly have said, no, my boyfriend's house is beige. Like it is very clear how you feel about beige, right? But like everybody's different. And so we want to think about it. But if you don't know, and I have a really cool download that we can talk about in a minute that has some color ideas for your audience. But if you don't know, here's some kind of rules of thumb. So blues and greens are always great colors because they mimic nature, and we all know how we feel in nature. Blue is great for focus. It's not agitating to most people. Of course, it depends on the shade. There's a million different shades and values. Could be dark or light. You just want to make sure it's not something that puts you to sleep if it's too soft. But a blue is usually a really good color for focusing for a long period of time. And green is very restorative. So we think about how we feel in nature and how we feel in the spring when things start growing and blooming. That's how a green color. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your walls. It could be an accent chair. It could be a window covering. It could be something in your space, or it could be paint. It could be artwork. But thinking of blues and greens, they're going to make you have focus longer, which is great for productivity. They're going to make you feel restored and relaxed. Green is great for resting your eyes after staring at electronics for a long time. So you kind of can't go wrong with either of those colors. So, and then there's a lot of other things. I mean, we could go through the whole gamut, but as you can imagine, red, probably not a really good color for most people. It's kind of great for a gym if you want to get really pumped up, but it's kind of anxiety increasing. Yellow is really good for energy if you need to feel happy, if you're always falling asleep. And I have all that in the fun download for you. But color is a real thing that you should consider, and people don't understand what a toll it can take on you to spend too long in, say, a beige space, a white space, a drab gray space that you thought was chic and cool and sophisticated for your aesthetic. You're like being a hip, cool person in your apartment, yet you go in there to work and you're like, I've fallen asleep every time I come in here. You might want to check into that. So.
It's so interesting. And I love that you talk about color psychology. So I'm definitely going to check that out. Naturally, I've always progressed. I had my first office was lavender because that was my favorite color at the time. Mm-hmm. My second office was this light but bright blue, kind of like a robin's egg maybe. Mm-hmm. And I also painted my bathroom in that West Village apartment that color. My office in the West Village apartment. And then I moved into a beige space when I moved to New York City and was working out of a factory. I couldn't paint the factory, but whatever. And then my space in that West Village apartment was green. And I don't know why I just naturally gravitated to those colors, but that totally makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And also you mentioned blush earlier. Blush is a great color too. Everybody looks beautiful and feels beautiful and looks healthy in a pink, in a shade of a pink room. Mm-hmm. And so my last office when I worked outside of my house was a pale shade of blush, which I love. But yeah, pale blues, pale greens, blush, all of those colors are really good for you feeling healthy, for you feeling energized, for you staying relaxed, feeling restored. So yeah, think about that, and think about when you walk into spaces, you can start to go, oh, no wonder, now I can notice that the color is playing a role in how I feel when I come into this room or this, this zone or this area. Mm-hmm.
I love that. So what else, is there anything else that people should do for?
Yes, absolutely. So the other thing people do most, if they don't go to the back corner bedroom that's hot and drab and ugly, is they go to the kitchen counter or the kitchen table, which is the hub of the house. Every human that walks through is in there. Every pet that is in the house is in there. Every activity's in there. People are in and out of the kitchen all day for, food and homework and to get something to drink and just to pass through on their way to some other place. And so most of the time, even though we imagine building businesses at our kitchen table, kind of like a good entrepreneur would, it's rarely a good space for you to really create your work zone in. There's too many distractions. Even the distraction of sitting there going, I need to be focusing on writing this proposal, yet I'm getting pulled over to get those dishes out of the sink and put them in the dishwasher. So you really want to think about that. How many distractions are in the space? Is it going to be noisy? Are there going to be people in and out? Because you're really just, again, setting yourself up for failure. You want to have a dedicated workspace, even if you don't have doors and walls that can close and secure you. Try to find a spot that is not the center and the hub of the home where all the activity is running through there. Unless you live by yourself, it might work. But for a lot of people, that's not what we're doing right now. And it's really an issue, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's your thoughts on like the organization of your desk, if you have a desk?
So I believe in absolutely. I do this. The desk I have 2 or 3 workspaces in my house actually, and now that my husband's home, he's at one of them. But typically on a typical work week, when it's not quarantine, what I love is to move around my house. And really studies have shown that you're less fatigued if you don't stay in one spot all the time. So in the space that I'm currently in, where I do my podcasting and videos and things, I have an adjustable sit to stand desk so I can not sit too much. And I love that. So I can stand up a lot when I'm teaching or talking or podcasting. I have a desk in the corner or the end of our living room where we use it to play games and other things, but it's one of my work zones. And then I have my interior design studio on the back of my house, which would be like a sunroom, and it has a workspace in it as well. So if you have the option, working in different spaces is really great. And so they're all going to be a little bit different depending on the sunlight or what you have there. And you're not going to carry all of your stuff to all those spaces. And I like that. I like that I can keep my podcasting stuff here and maybe my design work in another space. But it's really important that you do think about the workspace, the work zone. I think it's important that you keep it organized. And you really do want to make it attractive. And as silly as it might sound, there's a reason why things like the Container Store and Crate and Barrel and all those places have stuff that people buy all the time. It does make us want to go there, and it makes us more productive. Like I'm looking on my own desk and I have containers for my pens instead of things just being everywhere. And I have an attractive, inbox and a right back here behind me on my kind of credenza that's plexiglass with brass piping that I put the things I want to get to first thing the next morning. And I have, an attractive Post-it note holder that I might use to write notes before I go on a podcast. But I've literally thought through those things, and it doesn't have to be expensive. But if you can have everything not only look attractive, which will make you want to go there and get off the couch, but also the more that you can have what you need in a space, the less you're going to get distracted. Because every time you have to get up and walk to another space, we know we're risking that opportunity to have a 5, 10, 15-minute distraction. And then we have to come back and try to get back into whatever it is we were supposed to be doing. So I try to make sure that depending on the zone, depending on the activity, really, that I've thought through what's happening on my desk, what's happening in the room, what's happening with lighting, and very intentional. It's not hard. You just have to think about it. And most people aren't taking the time to think about it. They're just like, oh, this will work. I'll just go here. And then they wonder why it's really not working for them.
That's so interesting. Like so many things I'm like, oh, I just naturally do that. Like I get up and like, I'll be tired of sitting at like the table that I work on. And then I'll go sit on the couch. And then I don't really work from my bed. But in this house, I've been like moving from space to space to space, like all day long, because I'm like, I can't just sit in like one place all day.
No, it's actually good for you, and it's good for your productivity to mix it up a little bit. You get less fatigued. It's just if you can start looking at those maybe 3 or so spaces you like to work and think about, are they optimized? Yeah. So like, there's always things you can do. Like I do like to work in my bed, and it's kind of a bad habit that I have because it feels nurturing. but it's not optimal because after a little while, my back's hurting. I need to stretch. It's not good for my posture, and it's just not optimal for, depending on the type of work I do. I still do it sometimes, more than I would like to admit, actually, but I still think about, like kind of when and where I allow myself to be in spaces and how to optimize each of those. Where am I sitting? Is it supporting my back, my body? And you can notice this by when you see yourself take a break or get distracted or your mind wander, notice where your mind goes to. Because a lot of times it's either like my back's hurting, or I need to stretch my legs, or, I'm hot, or something like that. And those can be the clues to say, you know what, maybe I need a different chair in that space. Maybe that's not the space where I spend long periods of time because there's not great air circulation in that space. And so it's really just being curious and being mindful and intentional.
I love that. So many great tips. Before we kind of wrap up here, is there anything else that you would like to share with our people?
Let's see. So we talked about really your expectations and mindsets, which is the number one thing, honestly, about working from home successfully, whether it's a pandemic or any other time, is just, I think, your mindset about it and your expectations for it. So that's number one we talked about. But yeah, really all of those things matter. The lighting matters. I'll use myself in the way I feel as a barometer, honestly. And like I was just saying, if my neck gets tense, if I start feeling agitated, a lot of times it really does have something to do with the environment. Either there's too much clutter, or I can hear a noise distraction or something else. So I learned to kind of turn inward, zone in, and sort of almost do like you would in meditation, like a full body scan in your mind, and just be like, okay, what's happening? Where am I holding tension? And then kind of follow the trail to what's leading to that. Because most of those things can either be remedied or optimized in some way that you could have a much better, productive, focused work session than what you're having right now.
I love all of that. I just want to ask you like a bonus question.
Okay, perfect.
What's the coolest thing that you've seen someone in your community doing to kind of make money during this time?
So I've seen everything from designers with workrooms, like drapery workrooms, going into making masks, which was so fun right at the first, and making like gorgeous, beautiful mask out of designer fabrics and actually turning it into not only donating a lot to charity, but selling them to the public. So that was fun and heartening. And I think just honestly meeting people where they are, which has been so fun. So I just have another client who was already working on kind of shifting her niche. She's outside of New York City and was really focusing on people moving to the suburbs. And so now there's so much data that's showing all these people fleeing big cities and going straight to the suburbs. And I'm like, girl, this is your moment. This is your moment to shine. And it's been so fun, instead of just shutting down, of like people paying attention to what's happening and leaning into it and meeting it, meeting the situation where it is, like meeting people where they are. And so she launched a podcast called Welcome to the Suburbs, like kind of on the fly, which is really fun. So just, I don't know. I love that when we get out of our own way, which is kind of hard sometimes for us starving artists, but when we really open our minds to seeing the opportunity that's all around us, we're some of the best people out there at meeting a need, at getting creative. And so I think that's been the really fun part to me. Another one of my clients is a chair designer. She has a luxury, like high-end chair company. And we've worked together for about a year. And so she's been launching courses on like how to design your own chair. And now she shifted into teaching people how to have an upholstery business. So people who maybe were put out of another business that have always loved this as a hobby. She's like, let's just teach you how to make money at this. So I love that kind of so many of the creatives I have are not only just thinking, like, how do I sell my end product? But like, how do I sell and this is what we teach a lot in my program, how do I sell my intellectual property? How do I look at where people are suffering or there's a void and fill it in a way that I would have never imagined that was possible. So that's been super, super fun. Have you seen the same with your audience?
So many. Well, I mean, my primary audience is jewelry designers and aspirational product businesses. So, at the beginning of all this, my business totally tanked at the end in 2008 because all the stores, I was selling to so many stores, and a lot of them filed for bankruptcy, which left me, and they had the jewelry. So
right.
Big problem there. And so because of that, like I had to pivot and kind of switch. So I've been through this before. I've been through something like this.
Me too.
So
yeah.
I've been talking to them for the last year and a half because I knew something was going to happen. I didn't know what. I could never projected a pandemic, but
exactly.
So I've really been encouraging them to like build their online sales skills if their primary business was wholesale and these live events, because if they go away or traffic ends or all the things, you still have, your direct to consumer customers. Yes. And I was just writing an email before this interview, like sharing some stats from our designers, and so many of them, like there's two that I'm featuring in this particular email. One, over last year, she has a 250% increase in her online sales. And it's significant because it's like tens of thousands of dollars. And another designer did like almost 400 times her online sales from this time last year.
And
the economy was stronger last year. So this is the thing that is so crazy. It's like people just diving into what they can do and loving on their people. And also their customers wanting to support small business, which I think
Yeah, I love that. We do have so much in common. We should chat over a glass, virtually over a glass of wine. We have so much in common. But yeah, I feel the same way, and that's exactly the same work I do. And I'm with you. I told in another webinar recently, I was like, a year ago in a webinar, I had a slide that said, if tomorrow your opportunity to buy and sell furnishings and product at wholesale was just instantly went away, what would you do? And I was like, of course you would pivot, you would change. And like you, I was thinking it was just going to be more of the direct to consumer product or the internet or maybe a recession, but I certainly was not thinking pandemic and that literally in one instant, like everything would be shut down. But the point was the same. And you and I were both sort of, in a sense, preparing for the same sort of almost apocalypse. We even called it that in one of our webinars, like the design apocalypse, because like we knew something was on the horizon because change has been coming so fast. We just didn't know what it was. And so it's been so fun, like your people I know are the same way, to be able to hear the stories where people are like, I'm so glad I started this process 6 months ago, a year ago, like 18 months ago. And it's not too late for those that haven't. You can still absolutely pivot, but it's been fun to watch the people who were like, I believed you, but I wasn't quite all in. And now I'm so glad that I took that leap, that I went down that path. And it sounds like that's exactly what your customers in your community is doing too, which is so exciting.
Great. I love it.
Yeah,
it's very
so
exciting.
fun.
I'm excited for them, like rooting them on. So tell us what you talked about this freebie, the color.
I think it's called your creating your most productive home is close to what the title is. They'll see it when they download it, but we will definitely get that over to you so everybody can check that out, because it talks about the color psychology. It reminds you don't have to take all the notes. It tells you what each color does for your psyche and how it makes you feel. And there's some other sort of hacks and concepts in there of really how to create your most productive home, whether that's your daily living space or your workspace. It applies to either one of those. And then beyond that, I think the most fun place to find me is on Instagram because of the work I do. And it's very, very colorful, the high-end design work I do for my custom clients. So it's a lot of eye candy, married with a lot of great business advice and entertaining ideas and fun things. So that's at Tobi Fairley on Instagram. And of course, I'd love to hear from anybody. DM me, say hi, say you heard the show, ask me any question. It's a real fun place to be interactive too. So that's where I would look me up.
Amazing. Tobi, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was such a fun conversation.
You're so welcome. I loved it so much too. And I just love to connect with other people that are just like-minded. Instantly you're kind of like, oh, they're my people. Exactly. So that was fun. I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you so much for watching this episode with Tobi. If you haven't done so yet, make sure that you go find Tobi on her social media at Tobi Fairley and listen to her podcast, Design You. You are going to love it. And if you love this episode, I would love for you to give me a little like or a heart below. And I'd also love to know what one of your key takeaways was. So you can feel free to leave that in the comments. If you haven't done so yet, I'd love for you to subscribe to our channel and share this with your friends. This is Tracy Matthews signing off. Till next time.